Floods and Exhaustion podcast brought to you by ITL Coaching and Performance, Blue Pineapple Travel, and SlayRX. My name is George Darden. I'm an endurance athlete and coach here in Atlanta, Georgia. I'm a father of twin boys. I'm a college professor.
And I'm Patrick Andra. I'm also an endurance coach and athlete here in Atlanta. I'm somebody who likes to read smart things and talk to smart people.
And I'm Michelle Frank. I am an endurance athlete here in Atlanta, Georgia. I work full-time as a CPA, and I'm a mom to 3 girls.
Right on. And we get to have a fun update about at least one of those 3 girls here coming up towards the end of the podcast when we talk about things bringing us joy. But we'll get to that in due time. Glad to see y'all once again, holding it together here amidst the end of the school year, going into Memorial Day weekend, still in lockdown?
Still in lockdown.
Mm-hmm.
Patrick, you doing all right? Patrick, are you wearing that hat because we had round 2 of Patrick's home haircut and it didn't go well? Please tell yes.
We could say that, or we could just say it's that they're encouraging talks to bring Major League Baseball back. So glass half full, glass half empty, however you want to look at it. Right on, right on. For those who are listening on the podcast, not watching us on YouTube, Patrick is wearing an Atlanta Braves hat, which I appreciate your hope there, Patrick. Very good. There was an article in the New York Times the other day about college football and whether that's going to happen, and about how there's a little bit of conflict and disagreement between individual schools, the NCAA, and even the governing bodies of the university systems of different schools. So we'll see what ends up with that. I can cut to the BS there. The schools with good football teams are all for it. Teams like my alma mater, Purdue, are like, we could do without it.
Well, the schools with the good sports need the revenue. So
yeah,
exactly what it boils down to.
Yeah. They rely very heavily on them for sure. That's no doubt about that. If you do need a sports fix, by the way, I will tell you. Obviously, the ESPN special about Michael Jordan and about the Bulls in the 1990s got a lot of attention over the course of the last little while, and I heard it was great. I haven't gone back to actually watch it yet, but this Sunday there's actually on ESPN going to be a special called Lance, and it's a 2-part special. I think it is. It's about Lance Armstrong, and it's about they have some very candid interviews with him and with George Hincapie and Dave Zabriskie and Tyler Hamilton, some of his other teammates who also admitted to doping as well, about the whole systemic drug culture of the late 90s and early 2000s in cycling. One thing you can say all sorts of bad things about Lance Armstrong, but one thing that's undeniable about Lance Armstrong is that he has grown more candid about his past over the course of the past 5 or 6 years. And so I'm willing to bet, based on the teaser alone that I saw on NBC Sports, there's probably going to be a lot of real talk and a lot of details there filled in. So yeah, be sure to check that out if you're a fan of cycling like I am. If you're not a fan of cycling, or if you're looking for something else to do, some other media to consume, we mentioned last week that we were going to start a book club. We put it out there for suggestions. We got, how many suggestions, y'all? We got like a dozen suggestions, right?
At least.
Oh, yeah, at least a dozen.
Yeah, and we looked at a bunch of them. So many, in fact, that we actually have now considered, and we probably will end up doing like a first half of the summer book club and a second half of the summer book club. But we decided for our first book to read The Happy Runner, Love the Process, Get Faster, Run Longer by David and Megan Roche. You can find that, get it delivered to your house. You can get it safely in a local bookstore or something like that. We're going to not read the whole thing all at once. We're going to check in with it in a couple of weeks. And then maybe after about 4 or 5 weeks, we'll actually dedicate most of the podcast to actually reviewing back over the book, talking about what we liked. And we might even bring on a guest or two. If you end up reading it and feeling really strongly about it one way or another, you either really, really liked it or really, really disliked it, be sure to let us know that. And maybe you can even come on and join us on the podcast and talk about why you felt the way you did. A little bit more about the book. Tell us more about the authors. Michelle, you looked up a lot of stuff about the authors. Tell us about them.
Sure. So the Roches are a couple. They run a team with a bunch of elite people and just a bunch of common runners called the SWAP team. Some work, all play. They're well known for just kind of their enthusiasm for the sport. And they coach John Kelly, Katie Arnold, Claire Gallagher, Amelia Boone, who's been, in the news a lot lately for all of her struggles with eating disorders and obstacle racing and ultra running. So the book came out maybe a year or 2 ago, and it has definitely been praised and lauded by just about everybody who I would turn to for a recommendation for a running book. So I don't know that one of us actually threw it in the pool for this book club, but once it came up, it just seemed like the obvious choice. There's some other good discussions that we had about other books, but I think anything with the word happy and running in it right now kind of suits most of us. So
absolutely.
we're
Yeah,
going
I
to go
totally
with
agree
that
with
for
you on
our
that.
first choice.
I totally agree with you on that. And I, the person who suggested it was actually Erin Weddy, who we've had on the podcast before. Right about a year ago, she came on and talked about the challenges of doing the Dopey Challenge, where you do 4 races over the course of 4 days in Disney World, climaxing with the Disney World Marathon. And so yeah, she actually gave the suggestion for that. So shout out to Erin Weddy. We really appreciate you're doing that for us, and we look forward to reading the book. Patrick, what do you want to add about the book? Anything?
I'll just echo Michelle's point that, I mean, we had a lot of great nominees. It was kind of interesting because when we first posted on Facebook and social media for some suggestions, I expected that we would get like 2 or 3 just over and over again, and we kind of see an obvious winner. Mm-hmm. But it was pretty apparent that asking people for their favorite running book or a running book to cover was almost like asking someone's favorite band. Like everyone had something new to offer. Like everyone had something that was very kind of personal to them and said, hey, this is a fantastic book that helped me at this point in my life or my running journey. So it was fantastic to see just the great response we got from everybody. And I do think running is almost like baseball, where it's kind of a literary sport. Like it's something that's kind of, the kind of internal, emotions are very kind of tied to the sport itself and kind of what draws people to the sport, what people find beautiful about the sport. And so I think that's part of why we got such a great response, is it is such an internal sport. It's such an individualistic sport, something that goes beyond just like the box score, so to speak. I mean, heck, we don't even really have a box score in running. And then the reason we chose this book is because, just like Michelle said, I mean, what better, subject to focus on than how running brings us happiness right now. Right now, we don't really need to do a deep dive into like the muscles and fibers that go into running. We need to focus on the happiness it brings. Like, there's a time and place to do a deep dive into like the scientific journals and like the meta-analysis, et cetera. But then there's also a time to just say, you know what, this brings me joy just because it does. Because for me, at least, I'm a simplistic animal apparently who, loves the oldest sport there is. And so now's the time to just kind of take a step back and cherish it. And this book, I think, is one that will help us do that.
Right on. Yeah, Michelle and to an even greater degree, Patrick wanted a book that would apply to our lives outside of running as much as it applies to our lives inside of running. And so that's in large part why we chose this one as well. Michelle, what was the name of the group that the Roches are the head of again?
It's called Swap Team. Some work, all play. They use the acronym SWAP. They have a Facebook group. They have a website. They're just pretty well known. They coach road running, trail ultra running, and a bunch of obstacle racers also.
All right, cool.
From the elite level down to, people that take 36, 40 hours to run a 100-mile race. So cool. I think they have a wide range of experience. They are both former USATF Trail Runners of the Year within the last 6 or 7 years, each of them. Megan's a doctor. David went to Columbia, and I think he did law school at Duke. I mean, they're very smart people. They're very good runners. And I think they just do a good job of bringing it all together for a variety of endurance sports.
Very cool. I'm excited about it. I'm looking forward to it. I'm going to check out their Facebook page and maybe, if they have the citizens.
I don't know if they'll let you in there.
So we'll see. So I don't know. I had some really not great online exchanges earlier this week, but we can talk about those later on. So
yeah,
we'll
you
see.
asked for that.
So yeah, I did. But anyway, so we're looking forward to that. One thing I will mention. So Patrick said that there were books that a lot of people mentioned that had meant a lot to them, and we had what I thought was a really good conversation, and it's the second conversation I've had of this ilk over the course of the past months about Once a Runner. And I read Once a Runner when I was in high school, and Patrick and I have talked about it on the podcast before and about how much we both liked the book and all that sort of thing. And it meant a lot to me when I read it, and I was just coming along as a runner at age 17 in a high school and in a community that very heavily valued football. And to read a book where the heroes, and frankly, the way they were portrayed, the better people in the book were the runners, and all the people who supported like the football players, and the football players themselves were not the real athletes and were not very good people and all that sort of thing. That was really important for me to read, and I appreciated that. That was something that I very much needed. So
that was good for when you were 17 and you're a little bit older now. So we wanted to dive into something a little bit more, today.
Exactly. And that's exactly the point that I was going to make, is that I think it was really, really, really good for 17-year-old George. And it meant a lot to me, but that doesn't mean it was the right book choice for this particular book club in 2020. So yeah, by all means, if you have somebody that is a young man that's growing up in high school and just budding as a runner and feels pressure to do other sports and is internalizing the messages that he's not a real athlete, he's some sort of clown because the real athletes do football and maybe basketball or baseball, by all means, point him to Once a Runner. But yeah, this one, I think the book we chose is a much better choice. So yeah, again, the name of the book, for those of you who missed it before, it's called The Happy Runner, Love the Process, Get Faster, Run Longer by David and Megan Roche. Check it out, get yourself a copy, and we will start reading that ASAP. My copy arrives tomorrow. Patrick, tell us what we're going to be talking about tonight.
Yeah, so today we're going to talk about, so just to kind of backtrack a little bit, we haven't done too many kind of subject episodes recently where we just kind of took a deep dive into a single subject. So today we wanted to kind of go over the topic or the subject of how to reframe or how to rethink your training in times of uncertainty, right? I mean, I would say most of the questions that I get right now as a coach, and even just as a runner, the questions I get from coworkers who are trying to figure out what to do with themselves as they're working from home or maybe have more free time than they want, is how do you approach running now that you don't have a race that you're training for specifically, and you don't know when we can get back to racing? So we want to just talk through some options that people can kind of walk through, or that people can kind of think about when they want to determine, okay, I don't have this driving force of a Boston Marathon, an Atlanta Marathon, or even a Peachtree Road race that says, hey, I'm 8 weeks out from a race, I'm 6 weeks out from a race. So without that driving force, without that kind of end goal, how do you motivate yourself, and how do you frame your training and your running in a way that's productive and it keeps you running, that keeps you happy, to kind of use the term from the book, and keeps you engaged? Because really the number one philosophy that we have, at ITL and out this podcast is consistency trumps intensity every time. I mean, the real goal for any runner, really the real goal for a coach when interacting with their runners, is to increase their consistency. We don't always have great runs all the time, but as long as we are consistently running, consistently training, that trumps the highs and lows of someone who, blows it out for a week or a month and then takes a long time off. So we just want to talk through how we each individually are kind of reframing our goals and reframing our approach so that, it keeps us motivated and it gives us something to, get us out the door and get us excited about running, and, allows us to set up running as a positive force in our life again, now that we can't, as I said, use that race as a driving force. And so we just want to go through a few options that we've considered, go over some pros and cons to each option, so that people can listen and say, you know what, this is an approach that I can take. This is a new set of goals that I can adopt in my own training, or this is or maybe somebody can listen to what we have to say, and they don't have to adopt the same approach as we do, but it might get them thinking about, okay, this is what I enjoy about running. Here's the approach I want to take this summer while we are in this time of uncertainty. And if you just keep getting them moving, because that's the real goal here, is just to always be moving and always be moving forward in your training and in your fitness.
Right on, right on. So I think it's also because the three of us are doing three different things. So in order to keep moving, in order to keep training, the three of us have done three different things. And so Michelle, we've talked about what all three of us have done sort of briefly, but we wanted to sort of formalize it, if you will, this time around. So Michelle, we'll start with you. What did you decide to do, and why did you decide to do it that way?
Sure. So I decided to refocus and put something very specific on the calendar in a time trial format. I realized after Boston called the marathon that I wanted to keep up the mileage, but it became a little bit of a problem once kind of the main trail system that I use shut down. I didn't have as much access to the soft surfaces, and as I kept trying to just keep the mileage where it was, but all my runs were either, on asphalt or the treadmill, it just sort of started to wear me down a little bit. So I picked a time trial, a shorter distance, 10K, cut the mileage a little bit, added in a little bit more strength, puts me on the track. Gosh, I have to go there 3 times this week, maybe only 2 times. It's just different. So it changed it up for me, and also gave me a point of reference from I'm going to start now, and 10 weeks from now, I'm going to run this distance at this location, and I can do it, you know, regardless of what the coronavirus situation is. So I'm really happy to just have something defined and a defined training plan for this one race distance.
Right on. Yeah, Michelle, I feel like you kind of took, you were probably the person who took something like you replaced what you didn't have with something of your own creation. Does that make sense? Like
Absolutely.
you're probably the one of the three of us that made the biggest apples to apples change.
Well, I mean, you guys are kind of, sometimes I think you guys are in La La Land, but you guys got to run marathons in March.
Yeah, no.
Right? So you guys got your marathon in.
I get it. Yeah.
And so you just do whatever you want because you got a race in this year. I mean, I haven't raced a marathon since December 2018. So if this is what it looks like now, I also wanted something that would be sort of a lead-in to marathon training over the summer. If Boston does happen in September, I'm going to maintain it's not happening in September, but just in case it does, I wanted something to get me to a point where, you know, I could use what I'm doing in this 10K buildup and it wouldn't take away from the marathon build if I have to go into that over the summer. So I didn't love the 5 mile cut down yesterday. 20, how many laps did I run around the track? 20 laps.
In preparation for your 25 lap race around the track. Yeah, that makes perfect sense.
Yeah, I liked my ignorance is bliss approach, but
you know, it's
Michelle, had you run a 10K around the track before?
I've never. I mean, he made me do a 5 mile cut down yesterday. It wasn't terribly fast, but it was so boring and long.
So the reason why I made you do that, Michelle, and the reason why I made you that, the reason why I put that on your schedule is because we all know that George doesn't make Michelle do anything. But the reason why I put that on your schedule is because I remember very clearly doing those runs when I was in high school or in college, and then doing a 10K on the track and calling back to those runs. Running around a 10K around the track it's just a different animal, as we talked about before, because you never really get that break of turning a corner or going slightly down a hill or something else like that. And so you need a little bit of a taste of what that's like.
Yeah, I thought a few times yesterday, you know, 3.5 miles, 4 miles, like I could just stop. I could pause my watch and restart. You'd have no idea. But I just kept going because I figure when it comes to the time trial, I'm not going to stop and start. It seemed like a lot of laps around the track.
Yeah,
so.
It is.
It seems like it because it is.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, 25 laps around the track's a long way to go, but I think you're going to do great. You know, I don't take for granted the fact that I got to race. I appreciate that very, very much, that on March 8th, I was able to squeeze in a race before everything literally shut down a week later. The race that I was able to run is the race that everybody pointed at and said, well, LA got to do it. And so I do get that. And I think that puts Patrick and me in a very different place from where you and a lot of other people are. I saw, you know, you and I think, were in a conversation. Michelle, I don't know if you weighed in on the conversation, but it was on the Fast Women Facebook page that both you and I are members on. And a woman basically said on there, I was preparing for Boston and then Boston didn't happen. And I just kind of kept on running, kept doing long runs. She said, now I kind of really feel like I'm breaking down here.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's a reason why the marathon build is, you know, I mean, some people could probably get away with 8 to 10 weeks, but 12 to 16 weeks. Yeah. And then you have to peak and kind of take a step back. So, but it was interesting because, you know, and I commented on there. I said, you have to remember that when you take a recovery at the end of after a race, you're not just recovering from the race, you're recovering from the entire build. Right.
And this particular runner, and I totally get where she's coming from. She didn't feel as if she could take a recovery period because she didn't get to have her big climactic race. And right. I said, go to a time trial this weekend, you know, do a drop taper this week, go do a time trial this weekend, and then take your recovery and let all these things that are starting to bother you and the mental breakdown you're experiencing, you know, take that time, recover, and then start building up for a race that will hopefully happen, you know, sometime later on in the calendar. But
I also think we're seeing a lot of distance runners go for maybe a shorter distance. I know McCurdy Trained has a virtual mile. I know Northern Arizona Elite. I mean, the times were nothing to write home about, but they all went out and did a 5K time trial last week, and you were able to follow that on social media. So you can go bust out that 1 mile, 5K time trial type of thing every few weeks, and it's not going to wear you down. But if you keep on going 20, 22, 3 miles, 3-hour runs every single week, like you're in the middle of a marathon build, I mean, I don't think anybody should be doing that now, because there's really no marathon happening anytime soon. So, yeah, it was a good approach for me. I mean, I think hopefully it works out.
And
I think one of the points that you were hitting on too, with your approach and the approach of the Northern Arizona Elite Club, is now's the time to try something different, right?
Yeah.
A lot of us get on a schedule where it's like, all right, I want to do Boston in the spring, I want to do a fall marathon, and you kind of just get into the rhythm where you're like, all right, I do a marathon every year, or I do an Ironman every year, or a half Ironman every year. But now's the chance to be like, you know what? I ran a mile in high school, and I want to beat that, or I want to see if I can match that in some way, or I just want to try something totally different, like a 10K on a track, something like that. So that's certainly one approach to say, hey, I can't recreate a marathon or recreate a half marathon or kind of my standard approach. So to heck with it, let's do something entirely new.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I'm with it. So we're not the only people doing these things. Very notably, thinking about like shifting out one thing for another. There's an ultra runner that we've talked about on the podcast before named Zach Bitter. Zach Bitter, last year, you'll recall, set a new 100-mile record. He ran 11 and a half hours basically for 100 miles, and he did it on an indoor track in Wisconsin, or in Minnesota, I think it was.
Good gosh.
Oh yeah, no, incredible, right? So we talked about him before. So Zach Bitter was originally set up this fall to actually do what was called Ultra London. And Ultra London is a race where you do a 100-mile race, and it's also around a track. So speaking of a lot of laps around a track, that would be 400 laps around the track. And of course he was, or be more than that, I guess, because you need those extra 8 meters per mile. But anyway, he was set up for that, and it, like all the other events this spring, got canceled. And so Zach Bitter last week said, all right, well, what can I do instead of Ultra London? Well, the current 100-mile treadmill record is about 12 and a half hours. He said, I think I can beat that. And so Zach Bitter got on a treadmill in his house, and he Zoomed the whole time, and he had all these like famous ultra runners and not so famous ultra runners coming in and supporting him along the way, and lots of fans over there to cheer him on along the way. And when it was all said and done, he ran 12 hours, 9 minutes, and 15 seconds for a new 100-mile treadmill record.
And he got on 2 treadmills, right? Not just one treadmill in his house.
Yeah, no, the logistics of it are kind of interesting, because he has 2 treadmills, and he went back and forth between the 2 treadmills because he didn't want either one of them to auto shut down in the middle of his run. 7:18 per mile is what his average mile was. But any of you who have done ultra sports know that's your average mile for your total elapsed time, and so it counts the time that you are not moving.
Right.
And he did take a few minutes off the treadmill from time to time in order to gather himself, to use the bathroom. At one point around 80 miles, he went into a bathroom and kind of composed himself and ate a bag of chips, which was the only solid food he actually ate the whole time. Zach Bitter is actually known for not fueling very heavily throughout the course of his runs. But anyway, he alternated back and forth. He said he would run a few miles over 7 minutes and a few miles under 7 minutes and a few miles over 7 minutes. He was playing with the inclines in order to try and stretch his hips and hamstrings out a little bit, because he thought it would be too monotonous if he kept it flat the whole time. And so, yeah, in the end, 12:09.15 ended up being his new 100-mile treadmill record. So just like Michelle, he had this one goal, and he said, well, I can't do that one, but I'm fit. This is what I'm trained for. Let me substitute this other thing in the place. He was successful. You're going to be successful too, Michelle.
So did he beat the previous record by over 20 minutes?
He beat it by 21 minutes and 21 seconds.
That's pretty legit.
Yeah, very cool.
He's fast.
Yeah, no, he's the real deal. So 2 100-mile records, one on a treadmill and one just outright. He's no flash in the pan. So yeah, so congrats to Zach Bitter there. Patrick, tell us about your approach. How you're reframing things.
So I've almost taken a bit of the opposite approach of Michelle, and for reasons that she actually talked about before, where I was able to get a marathon in the spring, didn't really have one scheduled for the fall, or wasn't really sure what I was going to do. So I kind of took the long view approach, or the kind of the long range approach, to say, you know what, instead of doing time trials or having a race goal over the summer or fall, I just want to keep it easy running. And I just want to use this period as a bit of a transition period to build a base for a potential spring race, hopefully Boston, fingers crossed. And then we'll say, you know what, I haven't had a chance to not race really ever. Throughout my running career, whether it was high school, college, et cetera, I would have a big race in the spring and a big race in the fall. And I've never had just a full year to train for something or to just have an off season just to do easy running. So I decided, you know what, instead of doing like track workouts and you know, long runs and things like that, I'm just going to do easy runs and medium long runs and focus on building up my mileage. So kind of my big goal or my big metric that I'm building to or building towards and kind of focusing on this summer is how many miles I get to run. You know, so it's almost like back to, you know, summer training in high school, for those of you who remember back in like the 90s and early 2000s when high school runners were just obsessed about how many miles they run over the summer. So I'm just taking that approach. And the benefit for me is kind of multifaceted. One, since I'm not running hard, a lot less likelihood of injury. And, you know, I certainly don't want to have to go to a doctor's office right now for a recreational sport. It also allows me to kind of just take a bit more of a stress-free approach to running, because I could start a run and say, I'll run somewhere between an hour and an hour and a half. And that's all the planning I need to do. You know, I'm not having to kind of hit times or hit splits or kind of make sure that I, you know, get in my 25 laps around the track or kind of make sure I hit my splits for each of the 25 laps. So that's really been my approach, is just to kind of scale back and, you know, use it as a way to kind of use it as a very much just a relaxing mechanism moving forward. And then the other kind of benefit to me, or this is, I think, is, you know, especially beneficial to me and something, you know, others might want to consider, is probably my biggest weakness as a long distance runner in the half marathon and marathon is the lack of easy mileage, or the kind of relative lack of easy mileage. You know, when you comparatively speak, when you look at how many miles I've run, how much I've trained on the track, how much I've trained for the mile and the 5K in high school and college, then how much, you know, I was running kind of short, low mileage earlier in my marathon career. But now's a chance to say, you know what, I want to try a different approach and just kind of build that base. And, you know, the base building is something that takes months. It's not something where you say, okay, I have a marathon in 8 weeks, so I want to kind of put in the easy runs now or the easy mileage now to build up that base. That's something that develops over months and years. And so if I don't have any short-term goals I need to kind of gear towards or focus on, I can kind of play the long game and just run the easy mileage. So it's really kind of fit in very nicely for me. So that's been my focus, you know, moving forward, is saying, you know what, instead of focusing on time or pace or, you know, goal, you know, race pace, I'm just focusing on mileage, just keeping it simple.
Yeah, in the same way that I feel like I said before, Michelle kind of made the biggest one-to-one replacement. I think you have made the most go off in the opposite direction.
Right.
Like you're just like, you know what, forget all of it, throw it away. I'm just going to make this my off season, you know? And I think that's good for all the reasons you just described, but it's definitely a much different approach from the one that I've taken and different from the approach that Michelle has taken. You know, I joked when all of these marathons started getting moved to the fall that I was like, hey, we're all going to be training for marathons together over the summer. Maybe not.
Maybe not.
And we'll still have to see. But I will say some other kind of news that happened this week might increase the number of people you get to train with here over the summer. People that are going to be building their base over the summer, Patrick. And that would be that Kona was postponed.
Right.
So, you know, initially you had all these long course triathletes who might have been getting ready right now and trying to peak for an early October World Championship Ironman. And instead Kona was pushed all the way back until February 6th. So they pushed that back. How many months is that? 4 months? 4 months. And so all of those people who were starting to really turn the screws or getting ready to start turning the screws to start doing some real heavy Ironman training, they're going to put that off now, and they're instead going to do a little bit more base building and instead get ready to turn the screws over the winter, or over the North American winter, I should say. So yeah, when we first got that news, Michelle, I texted to Michelle, and Michelle texted me back and said, "Isn't that going to mess up everybody's training?" And I said,
"Not for the people in Australia."
Exactly. So those of us who live in North America can get to see what it's like to have to train for the Ironman World Championships in the winter, like the Australians have to do every year.
So the question is do a lot of the, you know, elite North American triathletes go to Australia or New
Yes.
Zealand for training camp for months and then just come back for Kona. I think that's
I
probably
think
what
they
we'll
will.
see.
I think they will. Yeah. All these Europeans and all these folks that live like in Boulder and stuff like that. Yeah.
Sure.
I think they're going to go some.
I mean, the
or they'll
pool
go to
at Rally
Hawaii.
Sports is pretty cold in the winter. So
Yeah. You know, it is funny. I've had a conversation with several people about like, okay, so if New York can't happen in November, if they decide that November 1st, I think is when New York is supposed to be, maybe November 3rd, it's that first weekend in November. If New York can't happen that first weekend in November, will they postpone it? And I was like, well, they can't postpone it to March because it's still too cold in New York in March. There's still potentially snow on the ground in March and that sort of thing. So, you know, same thing kind of for Berlin, I would imagine, even though I've never spent any winters in Berlin, I'm not sure. So we should also mention here, there are some races that are actually starting to come back onto the calendar. You know, we talk about how there's the racing is uncertain, but there's at least 2 races that we know of that are coming on the calendar here in the next couple of weeks. One of them's local. I actually got an email today from Dirty Spokes, which is a race management company in the Southeast. And I've done a couple of their trail races before, and they have a trail race the weekend of June 6th. And so it's a 9.1 or 4.5 mile race. And they sent an email out last week basically saying, we plan to go forward with this race. And they sent out one this week that said, okay, we're planning to go forward with the race, but here is the 20 different things that we plan to be doing, or actually the 13 different things that we plan to be doing that are changing the way we're actually going out managing the race in order to make it safer. And some of them are kind of no-brainers. Like they're not having an award ceremony, for example. They're not giving high fives or hugs at the finish line, even though that's kind of a real big part of their brand and of trail running and ultra running in general. They're using wave starts, so they're not gathering everybody all together at the start. They're encouraging people to do face masks. They're trying to enforce social distancing both in the big open field where the start is, and of course at all the check-in. They're opening check-in early so that people won't all kind of rush in at the same time and be all crowded together and all that sort of thing. So they're not selling any merchandise on the race day. They have hand sanitizer, all sorts of things like that. And so yeah, they're doing all sorts of other things. They also, another race that's gotten a lot of attention that's going back is one of the Spartan races in Jacksonville. Michelle, tell us about that one.
Yeah, so Spartan came out and basically said that they were going to start their races again down in Florida. They, interviewed the director, and he was quoted as basically saying, if you're too afraid to live a Spartan life due to a virus, then you're already dead. We have procedures in place to make a Spartan event safer than going grocery shopping, going to Starbucks, or going in an elevator. So it's a pretty bold statement from a race director. They plan to have about 4,000 people at the event. They've taken away some of the obstacles that might be more, inclusive of, germy, spreading the virus. But that statement in and of itself, I think, really undermines the severity of coronavirus and what everybody's dealing with, and just with the mass number of people. And honestly, it just seems like a general disregard for science and all the recommendations. And just like Dirty Spokes, they put in a ton of, changes that they're making to mitigate the risks, but it almost just seems unfathomable that these risks are really going to be mitigated. I mean, if you think about a trail race and coming to the finish line, like people not being able to high five or hug, or they even said for the Dirty Spokes race that people are supposed to stay 6 feet apart even on the trails. So what happens if you need to pass somebody? Like, you're going to maintain social distancing, you're going to let them move out of the way so that you can run past. I mean, and with the obstacle racing, even more so, people just topple one another on those races. So I won't be signing up for a Spartan race, but it'll be interesting to see how it goes. I mean, I think these race directors' intentions are in the right place. People want to get back on a starting line. People want the camaraderie. People want to be with other people. I just think they're taking a pretty big risk to be the first ones back out there.
Yeah, I don't want to lump Dirty Spokes and Spartan together too much, because I do agree that Dirty Spokes, we'll see how well the different things that they want to try and do how well they pull them off. Do you know what I mean? Because
Spartan definitely has the egotistical. Yeah. Like, if you can't handle us,
right. And that makes me feel like
honestly, that makes me feel like they're not really going to care whether you do it or not. And in fact, if you disregard their guidelines, well, good.
They
that
won't
makes you more of a Spartan. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
I feel like Dirty Spokes isn't approaching it with that same sort of swagger and ugliness that
Sure.
that Spartan
I think
is.
I was just more equating the precautionary measures that each group has put in place to try to mitigate the risks. But again, I mean, Spartan is definitely acting as if they're kind of a rebel without a cause, I think, in this return to racing, and just with the statements that the director made. And there's a video on YouTube if you want to watch him say what he said yourself. So
yeah,
we'll see how it goes.
I feel like Spartan they're basically trying to effectively recruit to do their race the people who think it's all a hoax and it's all overblown and all that sort of thing.
And there are plenty of those people.
Yeah, absolutely. I think they're just like, we can get 4,000 of those people to come to Jacksonville in a couple of weekends.
And they're probably right.
Yeah. I should say also, Dirty Spokes, one of their things, they're also offering a virtual option as well. They're offering free late cancellations, so you can go ahead and sign up, and then if you like, you know what, I just don't feel good about it when race day rolls around, you can cancel and stuff like that. So but yeah, IFC, and I mentioned this to you, or UFC I guess it is, Ultimate Fighting Championship had a match this past weekend, and they put in place this long set of guidelines and that were supposed to govern their match, including the fact that they tested all of the fighters, and one of the fighters actually tested positive and ended up not therefore competing. They canceled that match. But among other things, they said there's going to be no in-ring post-fight interview after the main event. That's like a big part of UFC. And they also, there's going to be no shaking hands and no high-fiving or anything else like that. And so as soon as the main event ends, Joe Rogan hops into the ring and interviews the winner. And so the winner's kind of talking to him, all that sort of thing. And his hands were really bloody and that sort of thing. And Joe Rogan reaches out to shake his hand when the interview's done. And the guy goes to give him a fist bump. And Joe Rogan grabs his hand and says, "No, you can shake my hand. I'm not worried about any blood." And the actual fighter said something to the effect of, "Yeah, but the virus is a lot worse than blood, dude," or something, And so it's just, I'm really interested to see how well these things actually work in implementation, because you can write them down, but you have to actually enforce them to make them have any real impact. So I'm not confident that Spartan's going to, given the attitude of the leader of the organization, I'm not confident Spartan's going to really enforce their rules all that heavily.
Yeah. Anyone who has that blatant of a disregard for science is sort of just off my radar as anybody that I would want to follow anything.
So we went off the rails just a little bit there in talking about a reframing approach and that sort of thing. So let's talk about the way that I'm actually reframing it. So Michelle actually went from having like one thing on the calendar that she's gearing all of her training for. She puts another thing on the calendar and she gears all her training towards that. Cool, good. Patrick basically said, I'm just going to go ahead and start my off season now, and I'm going to train with no big goal in mind, just kind of build up my mileage and build up my aerobic engine and all that sort of thing. That's cool too. That's good. Mine has been to really go after a lot of virtual challenges. And I've gotten more into them as time has actually gone on here. I was telling somebody today that I realized last week that I've actually done more group workouts over the course of the last couple of months than I had like in the year prior to that. I do a lot of training by myself, and I've been doing all these virtual group workouts now. And it's been great. I've actually really, really enjoyed them. Right now, I'm in the midst of doing a tour of Sufferlandria, which is a 9-day virtual cycling event that's put on by the Sufferfest. They normally put it on, or they do put it on in February as a fundraiser for the Davis Phinney Foundation, which supports Parkinson's research. But I wasn't able to do it then because I was a month out from marathon, so I'm doing it now alongside a couple of guys that I know from my Blue Ridge Relay team. Today we did stage, we started on Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. So today I did stage 4, and then I'll go through Memorial Day. Memorial Day will be the last day. And so the hardest day, the Queen stage, will be on Memorial Day. And then as soon as that's over, starting on Memorial Day and going for 15 weeks until Labor Day is the Coast to Coast Cycling Challenge, which I mentioned last week on the podcast. 15 weeks, 105 days to ride as much as you can, and virtually you'll be put on a map on I-40 going from Wilmington, North Carolina towards Barstow, California. You can stop in, I think, Knoxville, Tennessee. You can stop in Oklahoma City. You can stop in Albuquerque, which is where I plan to stop after 1,875 miles. Or you can go all the way to Barstow, California, which is 2,400 miles. If you want to be on my convoy, if you want to be on my team, I mentioned this last week, let me know. We're currently
How many people are on that convoy this
17
so
people are on that convoy, and that's not big enough yet because we're still smaller than the Peloton singles group.
Wow.
So the Pelotons, it's not that sad. The Peloton single group is currently larger than us. That's okay.
Wait, you mean like a group of single people, like that use the Peloton app, or
yes,
am I mishearing that?
I'm presuming that's what the Peloton singles group is. Yeah.
Is
That's
that group set up
beautiful.
as like a dating group, like a dating app, but Peloton?
I don't know. They're about to be set up as a second largest team in the Coast to Coast Cycling Challenge behind Team Road Trip.
So how many more people do we need to get you on George's team?
We basically need to double the size of it. So
no big deal.
Well, we can do it. We can do it. So folks, if you are planning to ride a bike this summer, sign up for the Coast to Coast Virtual Cycling Challenge here. Get on Team Road Trip here and help us get across the United States, and of course, beat the Peloton singles group. So that's another thing I'm doing, but that kind of motivates me and gets me on the bike and helps me connect with other people, which again has been a big part of this whole thing for me. Virtual RAM is going to be this summer, which we talked a little bit about. The Race Across America for the first time is going to be virtual, and it's going to be on Full Gas, which is a online cycling platform that I really, really like a lot. Don't forget to tune in for our podcast in a week or two about all the great virtual cycling platforms that we've been reviewing over the course of the last little while here. But Virtual RAM, Virtual Race Across America, starts on June 16th, like it normally would, and it's going to go through June 28th, so 12 days of Virtual RAM. And you get to race 3,000 miles across the country if you want to over the course of that 12 days, or you could do 900 miles across the country. And they basically give you a route, and they just say, you have to do, if you're doing all Race Across America, you have to do these 150 rides in order. So ride 1, ride 2, ride 3, and it just, as long as it takes you to get through all of these virtual rides, once you do it through with all of them, you're finished with Virtual RAM, and that's your time, and that goes onto the results board. But then they also have, and they've never had this before, but they're able to do this because it's virtual, a 12-day challenge where you do one route a day for 12 days. And the routes are about an hour a piece, basically. And so I'm going to do that for 12 days, be a part of Virtual RAM, the first ever virtual race across America. I'm probably going to do a Knights of Sufferlandria challenge in late July, which would involve doing 10 Sufferfest workouts in a single day. I'm going to let that set in for you, for Michelle, for just a second.
Are you ever going to run again?
I'm going to. I'm signed up for that. The Nikki Hiltz's 5K.
By the way,
which just reopened their registration after they got so many great registrations, undoubtedly because we plugged it here on the podcast.
Oh, yes.
But they actually had to shut it down. They reopened registration, but they're like, sorry, y'all, we're totally out of t-shirts and we just can't get any more. But you can still sign up and do the virtual 10K and be a part of the supporting the Trevor project there. So yeah. So yes, I am going to run again, but like all the stuff I'm lining up right now are cycling challenges because I just feel more confident about my ability to ride a bike. Whereas, last time I tried to run, I was injured and I couldn't complete the challenge. So I'm probably going to do a Knights of Sufferlandria challenge, though, which involves doing 10 Sufferfest workouts over the course of a day. I'm looking for partners to do that with me, too. So if that's something that ever has fascinated you and you think will be ready to do it by the end of July, let me know. I have at least one other person that I've pretty much convinced, and the 2 guys I'm doing the Tour of Sufferlandria with right now are about halfway convinced, but give me a few more stages and they will be on board. I'm looking forward to that. And I haven't even told you this one, Michelle.
What else are you possibly doing?
I'm thinking about doing a virtual Everesting.
Oh, that sounded awful based on what I read about, what's his name that did it?
Phil Gaiman. That's what inspired it.
So where are you going to do it? Like, do you have a hill picked out?
No, I would do it virtually. I would do it on Zwift. There is a virtual version. All right, so let's quickly talk about Phil Gaiman. Let's talk about what Everesting is.
Wait, but Phil Gaiman didn't do it virtually, did he?
He didn't do it virtually.
He did an actual hill.
He did an actual hill, yeah. So Phil Gaiman, who I don't think we've talked about Phil Gaiman on this podcast before. He's a former pro cyclist, and he retired from cycling a few years ago. He did a lot of training in North Georgia. I've actually so exactly, yeah. I've actually raced him a couple of times. One of the real funny things about cycling is that every now and then a pro will just show up at a group ride or will just show up at the local road race and just annihilate the field. And so I've actually been in a couple of races with Phil Gaiman before because, I signed up for this Georgia Cup road race expecting to be me and a bunch of other dudes from the metro Atlanta area. And frickin' pro cyclist Phil Gaiman shows up and just murders the field.
Which means you can't win it and you're very upset.
Oh, no. Well, okay, yeah, maybe back then. But I think my being upset about not having a chance to beat a pro was offset by I get to race against a pro, which is not something you really get to do in a lot of sports. But anyway, so Phil Guyman retired a few years ago, and he took it on himself after he retired to start going around and taking back the Strava segments that different people had set KOMs on that were dodgy. So either the people were doping themselves, were actually using performance-enhancing drugs, or they had done it like on e-bikes or something else like that. And he said, all right, I'm a pro cyclist. I have all this time on my hand. I'm a strong guy. I'm going to go out and I'm going to start taking back all of these KOMs from all of these people that have gotten them improperly on Strava. And so he ended up getting a lot of followers that were following along with him doing it. And so he ended up coining it the worst retirement ever. And he created a hashtag and all that sort of thing. And then he said, all right, I'm going to try and raise $100,000 for this charity called No Kid Hungry, which feeds kids, hungry kids in the United States. And I'm going to try and do that. So sort of along these same lines, he decided last week that he was going to do this Everesting challenge. Now, what Everesting means is that you basically, over the course of a single workout, and it would usually obviously be a very long workout, but over the course of a single day or a single workout or a single race, single challenge, you get the elevation gain of Mount Everest, which is 29,029 feet, which is just short of 9,000 meters, right? And so basically what you have to do is you have to go up and down a hill in order to do that. And if you go up a long, gradual hill, you're not going to be able to do it because you don't get enough elevation gain. So you have to go up a hill that's steep enough that you will actually amass a lot of elevation gain, but yet it's not so steep that it's going to completely wipe you out before you're able to get 29,029 feet, right? And so Phil Guyman went out and did it on the Mountain Gate Ridge Road, which is a little bit over a half mile. It's about 11%. He would get about 450 feet or about 146 meters each time he went up, right? It's about 920 meters for those of y'all for the metric system. And the quick math on that, I know you're a CPA, Michelle. Can you do the quick math on how many times he had to go up and down that in order to get 29,029 feet?
Well, you said it was 900 meters, but wouldn't it be more like 900 feet to get 29,000 feet?
It was 900 meters was how long the hill was. It was a little bit over half a mile. 11%, he got about 450 feet for every time he climbed it. So in order to get the full 29,029 feet, he had to do it 60 times.
Like 60, yeah. I mean, that's crazy.
60 times. 60 times up, down, up, down, up, down.
And how long did it take him?
8 hours and 4 minutes and 6 seconds.
And what was his rest like? Did he get on and off the bike or?
Not really. No. He just did
and
it.
What is he taking for nutrition during this?
He was doing doing the sort of nutrition you would expect cyclists to use, like bananas and gels and all that sort of thing. He was just kind of doing all of that. He actually got up over 55 miles per hour on the descent, so he's screaming down this descent.
And he had a crew there, like he had.
So he had a buddy that was doing it with him, and then he had a couple of people to support him along the way. He actually was doing.
I mean, this is some retirement,
Worst retirement ever, like you said. It's hashtag
worst retirement ever.
He averaged, for those of you who use wattages, he averaged 259 watts for the whole ride. His normalized power for the whole ride was about 285 watts. His normalized power for over 8 hours, which is high. Y'all take my word for it. For 8 hours worth of riding. And so I think Michelle's favorite quotation from the article I sent y'all was that I had vomit in my beard, he said.
Yeah, gross.
So I want some of that.
Well, you don't have a beard.
So I'm thinking about doing it in early July. So maybe to replace the PC Road Race, maybe we'll do it on July 4th. And so that gives me enough time between now and then to actually grow a beard. And then I can do virtual Everesting, which they actually have on Zwift. It's an actual thing. And the commission or the organization that oversees and ratifies Everesting attempts, which is based in Australia, they actually recognize a virtual version of Everesting on Zwift. And I could do it on Zwift. And I actually was reading about today. And I was reading all the various things.
Do you really think you're going to survive that on Zwift?
I can grow a beard and then puke in it.
Okay.
What do you think, Patrick?
Have fun with that.
Let us know how it goes.
So, well, tell me this.
Yeah.
Tell me this. If I did it, and if I like set up, you know, like a Zoom chat room or something like that, would y'all pop in from time to time throughout the course of the day and say hello?
Yeah, totally. And also remind you how ridiculous what you are doing is.
Yeah. Hopefully you would come, like, I don't know, would that be helpful early on or later on in the process? I feel like maybe later on in the process, if you came
I think
on,
you'd want people, way more people and way more people to deter your thinking and your mental focus later on so that you're not thinking about climbing this hill again.
Maybe. So this time next week, when we come on the podcast, I will be done with the Tour of Sufferlandia, and I will have attempted to ride up the Alpe de Zwift. And the Alpe de Zwift in order to Everest, you have to do about eight and a half times up. And so I will do it one time, and I will report back whether I think it was a good idea after all. Sound like a plan?
And that'll give you some idea of whether you actually want to do virtual Everest.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can't wait to hear about it.
So this is what I'm doing. This is how I'm reframing things. And so we talked about Michelle. Michelle, you are replacing one thing with another thing. You're keeping the date circled on your calendar, which I like. Patrick is just going ahead and starting his transition season, racking up some miles, and already looking forward to next year, just sort of writing off the calendar. Me, I am embracing all the virtual challenges I can find and trying to find new and interesting ways to challenge myself. Let's talk about things bringing us joy real quick here, and then we'll wrap it up. Michelle, I like yours. Tell us what's bringing you joy.
Sure. So I had a big goal during the quarantine. I wasn't sure how long it was going to last, but I have a 5-year-old that turned 6 on Monday, and I wanted to get her riding a 2-wheeler. So had a friend from ITL help me assemble the bike. And by help, I mean she came to my house, assembled the bike. I sat on the garage floor and watched her, learned lots of good stuff. I did a little bit, and took her out, ripped off the training wheels on her old bike. I made her watch me do that. I took the wrench out of the toolbox, took them off, sat her on the bike in the grass. She fell over immediately. And then just took her to a parking lot yesterday, went back lunchtime, let her play with it for about an hour, went back after dinner. She kind of got it, and then went back today. And I couldn't get her off her bike today. So I would say that went really well. I got 2 other girls that we've gotten on a 2-wheeler. It did not go as easy as this one. So she was super ambitious. And as soon as she got it, she was just like, Mommy, get away from me. Don't help me anymore. So that's great.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Very cool. Very cool. Congrats. That is something that
that's exciting.
So George, you have twin boys that are the same age as Alana. So how's their biking going?
Not as well as Alana's. So you
think it's time to rip off their training wheels.
You are currently ahead of me in the Parent of the Year competition. But with your doing that though, you have inspired me to grab the brass ring a little bit more this summer.
I mean, it seems to be
a good project this summer.
Seems to be a trend. I have a friend from summer camp who put her son on a bike today, and one of Gavin's colleagues who texted me, and I thought he wanted to talk about business, but really he just wanted to ask me about getting Alana on a bike. So yeah, if it inspires other parents to get their kids out there and rip the training wheels off, just go for it. You got
awesome
time now. So
very cool.
Maybe this is the summer I can take training wheels off my bike.
I'll help you, Patrick. I'll take them off for you. I know how to use a wrench. Whitney would be so proud.
Just don't let go, okay?
And then I'll just push you. I'll just push you off a little bit down a hill. It's much easier to get started. I know all the things about biking now. So
right on. So Patrick, what's bringing you joy?
You know what's bringing me joy actually is rereading old books that I read in college and graduate school. We are quarantined. The DeKalb County Library has been shut down for the last 2 months, and so my only book choices are the ones I've owned from the last decade and a half.
You know, sometimes
so
I think we're not
a lot of old stuff.
Sometimes I think we're not as nerdy as other people think we are. But then Patrick comes along and talks about, like, what are you reading? Pride and Prejudice? Like Romeo and Juliet? Like, what are you reading?
No, Michelle, make no mistake. We're that nerdy. Yeah, go ahead though, Patrick.
Yeah. First of all, I'm glad people ever question the nerdiness. That sounds like at least as a step up that there's some uncertainty there. Now, mostly just nonfiction. I love like nonfiction history and then all kinds of stuff. Yes, that's bringing me joy. It's always fun to look back and read things that, now feel and look different than they did 10, 15 years ago. when I was a younger, just as nerdy guy as I am now.
Right on. Patrick, tell me this. So tell me one book that either you read before and you loved, and then you've reread it and you're like, you know what? It wasn't that great. Or a book that you read before and then you read it again, you're like, you know what? That book stands up. Give me one of those two, or both if you feel so inclined, but a book that either totally stood the test of time for you or did not at all stand the test of time for you.
Stood the test of time definitely was the Martin Luther King series written by Taylor Branch.
Okay.
That one's pretty long. That's about 3,000 pages, just to give you an idea. It's split into 3 parts. It's an extensive history. It took him about 30 years to write.
Mm-hmm.
That one obviously stood the test of time.
Right on. Lives up
And there
to
are plenty others. Anything by David Halberstam, whether it be The Amateurs, Everything They Had, The Best and the Brightest. He's one of the best writers of the 20th century.
Right on. Very good. Very good. All right. So the thing that's bringing me joy, we'll mention real briefly here. Anybody who has listened to the podcast before might have picked up on one of my personal picadillos, and that's the fact that I don't give somebody kudos for anything they do on Strava unless they have actually given that Strava activity a name. So if you have an automatic upload from Strava, from your Garmin Connect or from something else like that, it will upload onto Strava and it'll simply call it morning run or morning ride or lunch run or lunch ride or evening run or evening ride. And if you scroll through your Strava feed of all the people that you follow, that's almost all of what you see, right?
And that bothers
morning
you?
ride, it drives me insane.
I never knew that.
Yeah, no.
So you want people
never
to
knew
go
that?
into their, no, you want people to go into Strava, edit their run and title it?
Yes.
No, George, people don't have time. That's why there's an automatic upload.
It is so good that you said that, because that segues directly into what's bringing me joy. So I have always said that I won't give kudos to those. So now there is a new service called Bandok.com, and that's www.bandok.com, Bandok.com. And you can go there and you sign up for a free account, and it connects with your Strava account, and then it will automatically replace whatever lame automatic name is there. And so if it's morning activity, morning ride, lunch run, evening activity, something else like that, it automatically replaces it with a snazzy new name.
So what's an example of what would it replace?
Abandon the search for truth, settle for a good fantasy.
And it just
Look,
comes
I got
up
a
with
few
multiple...
good years left. If I want a Chips Ahoy, I'm having it. Waffles are just awesome bread. Fulfill the prophecy, build a legacy, manifest destiny.
We didn't talk about
I love
it that
a good
much,
nap.
but
Sometimes it's the only thing getting me out of bed in the morning.
all right, George, we get it.
Whole
Here's
damn
another
planet
George,
wanted a piece of me.
will
These are
that,
money.
Will that still work with the changes that happened this week with Strava?
So we'll see. Now we don't want to get too deep into the changes that happened with Strava.
No, we definitely. You guys can check out George's comments on the DC Rainmaker article if you want to see George get deep with DC Rainmaker.
No, we don't get deep. We just disagree a little bit. But Strava did change the way they're doing things this week. They're throwing more towards their subscribers. They're only going to have one subscription level, and you have to subscribe for a measly $5 a month. If you want full access to their leaderboards and their route builders and their matched runs and a lot of the things they've been offering for free over the course of the past several years. And so I was already a Strava subscriber. I don't have a problem with Strava actually trying to become a profitable company at all. They did, as DC Rainmaker pointed out, kind of mess up the app developers of the 44,000 different apps that integrate with Strava because they didn't give enough grace period. They basically should have given them more of a heads up.
I mean, they basically pulled the rug from underneath 44,000 people who which I can
appreciate, which I think is a legit complaint. But that being said, they will have some time to pivot, and I'm sure that they probably will, and I'm sure that they'll come around because Strava has become a pretty central part of the endurance sporting community, not just in the United States, but around the world. And so yeah, we'll have to see whether Bandok will still be able to integrate with Strava. I'm sure that they will because most of the changes had to do with leaderboards. And so since Bandok is just naming your runs and naming your rides and naming your weight sessions and all that sort of thing, I'm sure they won't have any problem. So
I'm going to do it.
Means, go to Bandok.com. You should do it. And you will get bad decisions make good stories.
That's so true.
I used to think I'm indecisive, but now I'm not sure. These are going to be great, Michelle. Abandon the search for truth. Settle for a good fantasy. All names that they will put in there for you. And by the way, if you read the name, like if you go on Strava or if somebody like comments, what is up with this weird name or something like that,
They probably love that.
You can actually put a frowny face on there and they'll change it for you automatically.
Oh man.
And if you feel like, you know what, these names aren't all that great, I could give better names. They actually have a repository where their subscribers can upload new names and they use the new names for everybody.
You are way hype about this.
I'm psyched. I'm psyched. So Tour of Sufferlandria comes with all of its own ride names and all that sort of thing. And so obviously I'm not able to use this, but I'm actually excited to do just some sort of run-of-the-mill activity next week and have Bandok come in and give me a snazzy new route name. With that, everybody go out and sign up. Thanks for joining us, Michelle. Thanks for joining us, Patrick.
Always enjoy it.
Michelle, nothing to say? You don't always enjoy it?
Oh, I thought you were going to just stop the podcast after you said that. No, it was great. Happy to be here every Wednesday night with you guys.
Right on, everybody. Thanks for joining us.